Well, I heard a story once about a priest who saw a picture of a pulpit. And it looked pretty much like your traditional wooden pulpit, probably a little like this. But right near the place where the preacher would place the Bible or the sermon notes, there was a carving in the wood. And what was carved in the wood was that passage from this morning's gospel that said, "Sir, we wish to see Jesus." I thought that was very cool. I think it's every preacher's hope that something they will say in their sermons will help people see Jesus a little clearer. I know I hope that. And I also know that the experience of seeing Jesus isn't reserved for just what's said in a pulpit. My greatest hope is that we all have the experience of seeing Jesus everywhere in our lives. Well, today is St. Patrick's Day. The Irish are my people, just in case you couldn't tell from my face. And Celtic spirituality is my grounding. It's my spiritual love language. The Celts believed that the love and grace of God is present in all of life, not just in church. They believed that our homes are cathedrals, every table that we sit at is an altar, and Christ is the guest at every gathering, bidden or unbidden. Christ is found in all of creation. The world teems with the abundance and beauty of God, and we are connected to every cell of it. We are all one in the love and power of the cosmic Christ. There is no separation between any of us or any of the world around us. It's an incredibly hopeful and transforming spirituality to ground one's life in. Leave it to the Irish. It does make me wonder, though, why it's so hard for us to see Jesus, to experience the cosmic Christ in our everyday lives. We struggle as we move through our week to stay connected with God, if we even have a moment to stop and think about God at all. What makes it so hard to stay aware of this transforming love that is always with us? Well, I think this morning's gospel sheds some light on this. Jesus tells us in this gospel, unless a grain of wheat falls into the earth and dies, it remains just a single grain. But if it dies, it bears much fruit. Those who love their life lose it, and those who hate their life in this world will keep it. Over and over again in the Gospels, we hear Jesus talking about dying. His dying, and our dying as well, losing ourselves, letting go of things, a kind of self-emptying that allows God to transform us. We hear this, but let's face it. If we're honest, we have to admit this doesn't sound much like very good news. Death is a very hard topic for us in our culture. I know. I was an oncology chaplain, and I was a hospice chaplain. So I've been with many people preparing for their death. We as a culture are all about vitality and independence and achievement and autonomy. Yet many of us, myself included, start to experience something a little different as we age. We get a better understanding of having to let go of things that are important to us, or make us feel significant, or help us deal with the insecurities and fears of our lives. Jesus is telling us this morning that all of life is a series of deaths and resurrections, of dying and regeneration. Jesus tells us that the very thing that we dread, that we fear, that we avoid and repel from, is the way to wholeness. A paradox, right? How can this be? Well, I often tell people, when you are faced with a paradox, pay very close attention, because God is very near. I think what God is inviting us to is a complete reevaluation of our purpose and place in this universe. Thomas Merton put it this way: the true self should not be thought of as anything different than life itself, but not my little life, the big life. What does Merton mean by my little life? He's talking about those things that make me the center of my universe, or attachments, like the need to be comfortable at all costs, or judgments that make us just a little bit better, or sometimes a lot better, than other people. Our need to be right, to be the smartest, to be the one on top. Our grudges that keep us disconnected from anyone we perceive as wrong. Our fears that threaten that sense of security or even our own sense of self. These are the things we cling to, consciously or unconsciously, that make us the star of our own show and the center of our universe. And it is very hard to see much of anything else from that vantage point beyond ourselves. The Franciscan philosopher John Duns Scotus said that a human person is not different or separate from being itself, not the little being that you and I get attached to and take too seriously, but the universal being, or the one in whom we live and move and have our being. The big life is the life that shifts our perspective and shows us a different way of being, a way that moves us from the center of everything to one where we realize that we are part of everything, connected to every person, to all parts of creation, a way that moves the great source of love and being to the center of our universe. And we begin to see it all, ourselves, our relationships, our communities, and our world through the lens of God's unending love and inclusion. When we've gotten too comfortable with ourselves, which happens for me, I don't know about you, about 10 times a day, we get trapped in our small life and we will hold on to it for dear life because that's the only dear life that we think we have. Unless someone tells you about the bigger life, or you've had a conscious connection with the deepest ground of your being, there's no way one is going to let go of their false self. But the false self must die, or the single grain of wheat remains just a single grain. The dying starts to happen when we begin to listen closely to the God of love within us, and to listen enough to start to let go of the small way of being, our judgments, attachments, and grudges, and begin to see life through the lens of God, the lens of connection and kinship and love. And we start to see that it's even more than just about serving other people, which is very good. But the author and Jesuit Greg Boyle says, being of service is like standing in the hallway. It's good. But being connected to all people through kinship and love and inclusion and acceptance, that's being in the middle of the ballroom. That's where the fun begins. That kinship and awakening of God's perfect love is how wholeness takes hold and helps us to step out of the center of our universe and find our place connected to all of the universe, with God at the center of it all. That's when we become part of what Merton called the big life. You know, I remember growing up in my Irish Catholic family. It's a big family. And there was always a lot of grousing around St. Patrick's Day about the fact that St. Patrick's Day always lands right in the middle of Lent. And it was interfering with the celebrating and required dispensations from priests. I was young. I was like, I don't know what that is. Dispensations from priests to eat meat or drink beer or celebrate during Lent. I had an uncle. He was very Catholic, and he was even more Irish. And he was running around all the time looking for a priest just to get somebody to let him have a beer on St. Patrick's Day. We start the season of Lent on Ash Wednesday. Well, before I tell you this, I want to say that I think Lent is the perfect time to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. Maybe not the way my uncle does, but it was the perfect time. It's the perfect time to celebrate St. Patrick's Day. We start the season of Lent on Ash Wednesday reminding ourselves of our mortality. You are dust, and to dust you shall return. And then inviting us to take our personal inventory and see what's standing in the way of our being open-hearted in our lives. And encouraging us to let go of our egos and find our place, our true being, at the table of God. Just like the Celts have done for centuries through Celtic spirituality. I think the Irish had it just right. I want to end this sermon with a prayer from one of my favorite hymns that we just sang, St. Patrick's Breastplate. I walked into my ordination to that hymn. It's a wonderful, wonderful hymn. And I pray this morning that these lyrics will bless you on this St. Patrick's Day and open your heart as you continue on your Lenten journey. Christ be with me, Christ within me, Christ behind me, Christ before me, Christ beside me, Christ to win me, Christ to comfort and restore me, Christ beneath me, Christ above me, Christ in quiet, Christ in danger, Christ in hearts of all that love me, Christ in mouth of friend and stranger. Amen.